So next up, we have Mahmoud El-Azzeh, and you're going to be talking about Africa, the next frontier in mobile gaming. So yeah, give a big round of applause. I'll take it.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for attending today. Appreciate you coming to my talk. So I wanted to start with a little bit about myself. I'm Mahmoud, as you just heard. I've been doing product management for 15 years. I've been doing it so long, it wasn't even called product management back then. It was called something else. I've previously worked for companies like DAZN, which is a sports streaming company, and ESL Faceit Group. So I've spent a little time in the sort of esports space as well. I'm based in London, and currently I'm playing Marvel Snap, and Mancala Adventures. So today I'm here to talk to you about the African games industry, of course. And one thing that I think most of you probably know already is that games are a really big business, of course. Generally speaking, when we compare it to industries like TV, movies, music, combined, games is bigger than that. I think what's also interesting as well is if you look at the demographics of the users, or players we should say, is strongly female. Actually, I was in a talk earlier today where they were talking about diversity of players. And it's important to recognize and acknowledge that. But with Africa, what you might not know is now it's positioned to be a major player in the mobile game space. In fact, what we have at the moment, I think there's some animations here. Nope, no animations. OK, let's go back. It's weird, the images didn't come up. OK, I'm going to keep going. It has over 1 billion people under the age of 40, and some of the fastest growing economies as far as mobile gaming is concerned. So even if you look at the numbers here, 1.1 billion millennials and Gen Z, we're talking about 300 million plus mobile gamers. Again, you compare that to other regions like Europe or North America, that's huge. The next slide is really interesting because what it tells you about is what is the monetization potential, actually. So when you combine all of these factors together, what you're seeing is a demand for content in this region. App Annie, I think this data was taken from, well, it's not called App Annie anymore, so apologies, only tracks 4 African countries. And all 4 of them feature in the top 7 fastest growing geos by installs over the last 12 months. And they're African, which is crazy. And when you look at monetization-wise, compare it to countries like India and Pakistan, actually it's outperforming them. So certainly, if you look at the projections here, we're talking about 3.1x growth between 2015 to 2024. We're talking about 7.3x growth as far as revenue is concerned between those similar years. There's also something else. We've seen this story before. Actually, it's got a lot of comparison, or I think a lot of similarities to Southeast Asia back in the 2010s. Generally speaking, what we're doing is we're taking the Pareto law, the 80-20 law. We're looking at the top 8 countries in the African continent. And when you compare it with SEA, very, very similar. Population similar. The combined GDP is similar, except the smartphone penetration is better. So that's something to be aware of. And also, there's more access to things like bank accounts and alternative payments, where generally speaking, we're talking about low penetration as far as card is concerned. So again, very similar challenges that we saw over a decade ago is happening again. So that means we should know how to solve it, right? What does that also mean in terms of our future is that, of course, we know how Southeast Asia is today in terms of the revenues. We're talking about one of the biggest markets, of course. And that, in theory, bodes well for Africa if we follow the same journey. 8x our market today. There you go. There's the animation. However, when it comes to Africa, things that you should know about there are some challenges, of course. And these are the challenges that I wanted to talk about today, to share with you and sort of give our perspective. Certainly from a technical point of view, there are device constraints, of course, and tend not to have the latest mobile phone models. Although, speaking to African gamers specifically, that doesn't stop them from playing AAA mobile game titles at all. Doesn't stop them. Slow connections, again, depending on your region, is an interesting issue. But generally, they find ways around it. And there may be a data sensitivity thing to consider as well. But again, generally speaking, as I mentioned earlier, the right strategy is just go after the top 8. That's where you're going to get the majority of your bang for your buck from. And lastly, I think a big challenge is about inaccessible payments. So if you're familiar with app stores and the kind of payment methods they offer, of course, that doesn't really match up with our player demographic. So it's not a lack of willingness to pay, it's the lack of ability to pay. That's something completely different. Another thing that I think that's worth calling out is the median game file size. So there is a, let's say, historic concern when it comes to mobile game studios about how big can my game be in order to be successful. The reality is, of course, what the chart is telling you is that it's trending upwards, and this is data that only goes up to 2020, so of course it's going to be going higher than that. But the communities that we formed at Carry1st specifically, as I said, they're COD-M players, they're PUBG mobile players. They're not actually prevented from playing these games. They're finding ways. I think also as far as mobile data coverage is concerned, I think this is interesting to note. Despite what most people think, Africa generally has access to internet and data, so they do play online with their friends. This does happen. And as I mentioned, they're able to play some of those AAA mobile games. But it's only going to get better in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why it makes sense to really look at this region. I've been in a couple of talks today where they're talking about how do we find new revenue streams, how do we find ways to expand our player base. Well, this is a great place to look. One thing I also thought would be interesting to share is user sentiment. So I picked 2 different slices here. On the left side was a few reactions to Call of Duty Mobile launching servers in South Africa, and I think the things to pick out here which are really interesting. So there are certainly positive responses to that. The players are happy to see that they're being recognized, but there's also frustration. There's one user in particular who says, why is there no MENA server, for example? There's also talk about why just South Africa and not, for example, Nigeria or Ghana, where you have these really passionate gamers there. We also asked our own gamer communities about how they felt. Do they feel acknowledged by the games industry? Do they feel seen? And the general feeling is no. And the funny thing is, it's not that it would take that much to feel that way, just a little bit more of an effort, a little bit more acknowledgement, a little bit more feet on the ground, we'd say. So yeah, that's really interesting and something to be aware of. So in terms of advice and what I would offer to you, and certainly come and speak to me, I'm floating around tonight, so feel free to stop me. There is potential there. There is opportunity there. Find and engage your African gaming communities. Listen to them, because they are exactly the same as gamers all around the world. They have the same needs and same desires. You've got to understand what their friction points are. So it really depends. For example, it could be content that they want. They want more specific content for their region. It could be payments is the specific friction. So the content's there, but they can't pay for it. Again, not because of a lack of willingness to, but a lack of accessibility to. And then there's generally, is your game even there in a localized version, for example? Do you have servers there? That's something to consider. One thing that we found very effective is hosting events locally. So we had a couple of events, gamer-focused events this year called Festival, I should say. And that was great to meet the gamers and really listen to them and hear what's on their mind about how we can change the games industry and improve them. Another piece of advice, leverage partners who have feet on the ground, who have know-how, who have insight that they can provide to you. And one thing also I think is really important is don't be late to the party. Start the work now, and it'll pay dividends. So let me tell you about my company. So Carry1st is basically Africa's leading publisher of mobile games. We believe that Africa is certainly the next frontier for growth as far as mobile game developers and publishers are concerned, and we partner with some of the biggest publishers in the world. As a full-stack mobile publisher, we activate along 3 key pillars for our partners. That's user acquisition, monetization, and live ops and community. When it comes to UA, we're managing and funding localized UA campaigns that resonate with the audience. And we're leveraging our knowledge of gamers to really set things that will work. Monetization-wise, again, a lot of players don't have access to the typical payment rails that you get from app stores. So we find a way to solve that by providing our API payment gateway that offers hundreds of local payment methods and certainly integration support, whether that's for your own store, for example, or for even our own Carry1st store as well. And then lastly, we certainly provide live ops and community support too. Just one second. Excuse me. Sorry. Sorry, 1 second. Hello. Hi. Could you decrease the text size on the... Thanks. So when we work with partners, we usually go one of two routes. One is full stack publishing. The whole package covers everything on the prior slide that I mentioned before. And Pay1st, which is just monetization. So if you're looking to just have the payment rails there so that you're giving African gamers the actual accessibility to purchase content, then we can effectively do that for you. And what we've seen several times before is we've 3x'd, if not 5x'd, revenues when you publish in Africa with us. Here's a snapshot of some of the partners and projects that we've worked on. I think I won't cover it all in too much detail. Feel free to take a picture if you like. But some of the more interesting stories, certainly we partnered with Call of Duty Mobile, and we were very successful there. We 7x'd their active users, which is the highest in the history of the game. We also have our own tribe community, which has about 400,000 African gamers in there, and that's growing all the time. And very recently, you might have seen in sort of games industry news articles we published with, we've partnered with Riot to launch local servers in South Africa for Valorant, which is very, very exciting. We've seen a lot of positive response on social media, and certainly that's not the end of it. We will be doing further integrations with their shop, so that will be allowing their African gamers to purchase their content using our payment rails. And yeah, I'm ending a little early. I don't know if that animation is going to come up. There we go. OK, so that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for attending today. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Right, I think we've got time for questions. So, but thank you very much for that talk. Really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask one. I had a question about, say, mobile game ad revenues. So is that a good opportunity in Africa, and how does that compare to in-app purchases, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think as far as ad revenue is concerned, it really depends on I'd say the country probably is one of the things to look at. Generally speaking, from my experience, I don't know if there's a lot of conversion there compared to in-app purchases. Mm-hmm. The gamers I've talked to care more about buying content rather than ads per se, which again may surprise some people in the room. But it's not to say you shouldn't have a ad mon strategy. I mean, you should as a supplementary thing. I still think it's just like every other core gamer, mobile gamer, is you monetize through IAP.
We do have a question at the back here. Thank you. Sorry if I missed you before.
I was just wondering if there are any game developers in Africa that we should know about, that we just don't know about because they haven't gotten into the European market.
There are a few. I can't recall them off the top of my head at the moment. I would say it's not as big as other markets. I think that's still a very early stage area as far as games industry is concerned for Africa. There's only, I would say, a handful of studios right now. But yeah, every week I'm reading news articles about new ones popping up. And I even saw one earlier today. So yeah, I would say it's, again, watch this space. It's not a lack of willingness. It's, again, accessibility is part of the challenge.
Any other questions? I guess another quick one. I guess kind of following on to that, are we seeing kind of a lot of investment at like government level into the local games industry? So obviously that's individual countries doing that, but are we seeing more of that happening? Is it being taken more seriously, or is there work to do there?
Yeah, again, not trying to fly the flag too much for my company, but yeah, if you look at some of the partner deals that Carry1st is signing, and I have eyes on the ones coming up very shortly, yeah, you can see all of the major games publishers are looking at Africa as like the next big opportunity, really. So it's a matter of, one of the points I mentioned there is don't be late to the party. They've already figured that out. So yeah, it's a matter of join us and we'll help you if you want. But yeah, it's definitely moving in that direction.
Okay, great. And I think Yeah, if there's no more, then I think we're done for that. So again, thank you very much. Big round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Really appreciate it.